Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make doors for your fairy house. But before we begin making a door in the way that I have found to be the way I prefer, let's talk about some other ways you can make doors. First, you can build a door out of popsicle sticks. I tried that the first time. These work pretty okay as long as your fairy house is going to be inside, but then when you attach it to your hinge, it's a little tricky. Popsicle sticks don't drill very well, they crack, which means you're going to have to glue it to your hinge. And I found that over time the glue doesn't do a very good job of staying on that popsicle and the hinge. So I have given up making doors out of popsicle sticks. Number two, you can take a piece of wood like this and slice off a piece of tree cookie. That's about the right size, and you could use this as your door. But I have found that it's really hard to get exactly the right diameter piece of wood I want. How thick do I make it? And then when I go to drill the holes for the hinges, these tend to crack, split, and fall apart. Hasn't been a great idea, even though I do like the way these look. Third way is to take a piece of wood and run it down the saw the long way to get a piece like this and shape this into whatever you want, kind of a half-shaped fairy house door, and try to do that. But these do work pretty well. They're great thickness and they're super hard, but you don't always get what you want. It's a little tricky and it's very labor intensive. I have a better way. And that way involves using Sculpey modeling clay. Now, Sculpey is available at Michael's. It's about $2.50 for a package like this. It's great stuff. You can mold it, bake it. It's a hard polymer clay that only hardens when you bake it. It can be painted and glued. It's great stuff. But I found that there's limitations to this as well. My fairy house is outside. This stuff gets brittle over time and tends to fall apart. Plus, if the fairy house is being used by kids, this is not going to last very long. So Sculpey's pretty close, but there's one more thing that I found to be even better. And that is to make the door out of Sculpey, to make what I want it to look like, and then use silicone molding putty and pourable acrylic to make the final product. And that has been the way I've been doing it. So I first make my door out of Sculpey and bake it to get this hard door. And I can make these as fancy as I want because I only need to make one of them. Next, I use the silicone putty to make a mold of that door. And then I use the pourable acrylic to make the final product, which I then paint. These two things look exactly the same, but this one is the polymer clay, which I can feel has got some give to it. This does not. It is hard. And it's easy to drill, and it holds up well to the elements. So today I'm going to show you how to make a door using the Sculpey, the modeling clay, and the acrylic. Let's get started. Okay, Sculpey is a polymer clay, which means it is not going to dry out in air. It only dries out when it gets old. So I did get this in a plastic bag. I don't really need to do that. I just do that to keep it together. This Sculpey's been in my basement for a little bit, so it needs to be kneaded a little bit. I did used to make little buildings and things out of Sculpey for my fairy houses, but they did not do well outside. They got brittle and they broke. And as far as the doors go, they always broke. So unfortunately, I had to come up with something else because I do like the color of this. All right, I did also splurge and buy myself a little set of Sculpey tools. You don't need to do that. You can just use a regular rolling pin for this part. And then if you just have something like I often use the sharp part, you can get a little needle or a pin or something. Okay, I've rolled my Sculpey out. It's about that thick. I don't want it too thin because I have to be able to get my hinges bolted on there without snapping it. Okay, now the hole on my treehouse is about that big. So I need my door to be bigger than that, and I'm just gonna make a little circle. And cut that out. Okay, now I need to make it look like a nice wooden door, and no wooden door has nice edges like this, so I'm gonna just mash the edges a little bit. Now when I make the mold, only one side is going to get the mold made on it. The other one ends up flat. So I only need to decorate one side of this. So I'm going to pick this side, and I'm just going to make it look like wood planks, which means I'm going to draw little lines for the wood. And then I want to make it look like real wood, so I'm going to swirl some wood type shape things into it. Okay. Also, no wood is perfectly even at the end. There's always like little nicks out of it. So I'm going to take some nicks out of mine, just where those wood joints come in. All right. Make it look a little banged up. Might even put like a little knot hole right there. Okay. All right. I also want to include some bands on there. So when I paint my door, I can have those little bands going across it. So and I'm gonna just kind of smash them in a little bit. All right, next one. Okay, now if you're super crafty, you can put some kind of, I don't know, ivy decoration or something. I am not that crafty, but I am going to put a doorknob on this. I'd like it to look like a little tree stump. Make sure it's stuck on there. Make some swirls on there. All right, that looks pretty good. This door is pretty small, but if it were larger, I could put a little window on there, or maybe I could put a door knocker or something, but there's really no room on this. So I am going to go and bake this now to harden it up at 275, 15 minutes every 1/4 inch thickness. So I'm going to put this in for about 40 minutes, and then we'll be ready to make our mold. Okay, our little door is out. It's cooled down, and I'm ready to make a mold out of it. I'm going to get my silicone putty and measure out equal amounts, and it has to be enough to cover the door when I'm done. Deep enough. Let's see here. That should be pretty good. Okay, mix it together. A little piece of wax paper here so it doesn't stick to the tablecloth. Stuff sets pretty fast, so once you start mixing, got about 2-3 minutes. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna press my door into it. Make sure the door is covered above where the edges are, but also make sure that it's level. And it's not sticking out the bottom. Had that happen too. Press it into the grooves on the edges. Make sure it's high enough that it's not going to spill out once it levels out. Okay, should be pretty good. Looks pretty level. Now we wait. Now the cool thing about this molding putty is you can make other items, you can make other molds of other items that you want to have in your house, especially if you're going to be making more than one house. For example, I made, after watching some YouTube videos, I made a little donut and I made a mold out of it. And I made a cake. and made a mold of. You could see that the cake on the plate's already broken. That doesn't happen with the resin. I also made a teapot. And I made a mold of it. And I made a teacup. And made a mold out of it. So that was fine. I only had to do that once. I did on my first outside house make just the Sculpey and put it out there, and after 1 year it looked terrible. So I'm gonna see how it works out with this stuff instead. I'm pretty hopeful. Meanwhile, I did find some other items just in the dollar section and whatnot that I'm gonna make some molds out of so that I have them. I've got some frogs, a teacup with a spoon, some fruit, fish, and so I'm gonna do that with my mold. Okay, we're ready to pull the door out of the mold now. Demold it. I've got a nice mold here. And I'm ready to create the acrylic, the resin, in there. And I've also got some of these other shapes. There's the teacup, the spoon that fell off already. Doesn't matter, I already have the mold. And some fruit. I think these are gonna be too small. If the molds are too small, they don't generate enough heat. So the best way to do that is to heat them up, although quite honestly, I am in my garage right now and it's very hot, so they might be okay. Maybe we'll try it. There's a little vegetable garden I did earlier. So as long as this is the turtle. As long as I'm pouring resin, I'm just gonna pour a bunch of resin. We'll see how the frogs work out. Okay, so the resin comes with these little cups, which I find to be somewhat unhelpful because they're really tiny. I'm making something big, so I got like these plastic cups that have the lines on them. They are great because you gotta get equal amounts. So I find it super helpful to have these lines on there. That should be enough. And it is really hard to know how much to use, I'll be honest. You don't need a lot though, because the liquid's gonna double. That looks pretty equal, I hope. Okay, dump that in, start stirring. Following the directions, you stir for about 30 seconds. And then you pour it into the mold. I have some extra, so I'm gonna pour another door. You can see it's already turning white. They're already turning white. I think it's because it's really hot in my garage. Now the tricky part of this is the door that I want to put this on is on a piece of log that's really curved. So when I pull this out, I'm going to bring it over to my house and wrap it around to see if I can't get that curve to fit in there. Also, I am going to trim one side of it so the hinge fits better. Okay, let's take some of these out. Here's our little froggies. Just trim them up a little bit. Cut the stuff, it sands just fine. So don't worry if your mold isn't perfect or if you got extra pieces like I do. Froggies are cute. Little froggies. Let's see, what's this one? Oh, that was my garden. Some pumpkins and lettuce. Little lumpy. Fine. Okay, let's see. This one is teacup. Oh, that came out pretty good with the spoon. And this is the turtle. Yep, Mr. Turtle turned out just fine. No legs, but that's okay. He's going to be in the water. And here's the plate of fruit. Apparently I didn't make it deep enough, so I'll maybe have to come up with a plate or something. Okay, here's my door. That came out pretty good. It's still hot. And I did end up pouring the cake too. Okay, and the reason I'm pulling all these out, one, they're done, but two, I have to, if I'm gonna paint them later, which I am, I need to get a primer down. I need to get some paint on it now before it cools all the way. And that's where this stuff's gonna come in. Whatever I found in my house, you can just use a spray paint. Doesn't matter, you just need to get some paint on it. I've got this thing I put on here to sort of try to get it to curve around. I pulled it out while it was hot and curved it around, and now it is hardened into that shape. That's pretty cool. I have to spray paint that too. And I did cut the flat for the hinge. Okay, the door is pretty much dry with the primer, and I'm ready to move on. So I'm gonna just start with one of my little browns, and I'm gonna use a bunch of different browns to make this look pretty real. This looks pretty terracotta, kind of very light brown. So I'm just gonna go hog wild on this. When that dries, I can start adding other browns and mixing browns and decorate it any way I want to. You can make your door purple if you want to. I'm gonna make mine look more like wood. So it's totally up to you. All right, here's my doors. I finished painting them. I now need to mount them on the house. They turned out pretty good. Okay, I'm gonna start with my little one. Need to get a hinge. I found this hinge in my little hinge supply. That's kind of fun. Pretty sure I just got that at the hardware store. Now this is a nice hinge because with this little door, it gives me some pretty good coverage as far as bolt patterns go. And then I will mount it right there. It's gonna look nice. So I'm gonna need to drill some holes to match that. And then I'll insert some bolts. Okay, I've got all the bolts on. Now, this silver doesn't really match my brass. I can easily just take some paint and dab it over the top of that, so it's not quite so obvious, but I'll do that after I get this thing mounted up. And I just have some bolts on the back. The hinge does come with screws, but I found they're just too long for this material. They just go straight through it, so I've never been able to really use them. The bolts seem to be a good solution to that. Okay, I've got one door on. That looks pretty good. Time for the other one. All right, I've got my hinge on there. My bolts do stick out a little bit, so if it really bothers me, I could go get a hacksaw and hack those off. And I may also end up painting those something else because the silver just really doesn't match. It's a little wonky because the bark fell off there, so it wasn't very even, but that works. Oh, that's pretty good. All right, we have our two doors. That's the end of this video. At this point, you should now have a base structure and some doors. Should be looking pretty good right now. Keep watching. We're gonna add a pond next.